just read you Judy's fascinating little bio. She is quite an amazing woman. She's a retired ICU nurse with 47 years experience and 2 master's degrees in nursing, all very sound credentials in Western medicine, but not needed for the afterlife work she does now. At the end of Judy's career, she learned to be an Anam Aira, a soul friend, offering extraordinary counseling to provide a peaceful death for others. That led her to her ancient role of Anam Aira, one who crosses the veil, not generally practiced today. Judy set out to learn how to cross the veil between physical life and death to assist souls in their transition. She has been doing Anam Aira work for several years, helping hundreds of people, those about to pass over to the other side, those already there, and those still here in the physical form. So Judy has a fascinating presentation. We ask that you please hold your questions until the end. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A. And with that, I'm going to let Judy take over.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. So many of you look familiar. How many were here last year? Okay. So, yeah, nobody on the other side has ever asked me what degrees I have. So just a little bit more detail in, I need to get this, about me. So this is the only picture that I have of in my whole career of me being at work. And this was, I was 27 or 28 years, I think around 27 years old. And I was the head nurse of a coronary care unit in a hospital in Pasadena, California. That's when this picture was taken. But I started in critical care the year after I graduated from nursing school. The hospital that I graduated from had, the year after I graduated, was opening an intensive care unit. And it was, at that point, it was only the second intensive care unit in the state of Connecticut. And the year before, I was working on a regular surgical floor after I graduated. And, thank you. And I had a couple of my patients had cardiac arrest during that year, and I never felt like I did a good job. I never felt adequate, so I thought, maybe I would go be in the ICU, and I would certainly learn how to deal with cardiac arrests, which I certainly did learn how to deal with cardiac arrests. So I was in critical care nursing for 47 years. And I retired in 2012. So at the beginning of my career and at the end of my career, I was at the bedside, which I absolutely loved, particularly at the end of my career. When I went back to the bedside after not being at the bedside for decades, it was like falling in love. Every day was like, and taking care of patients, direct care, was like falling in love, and I just loved it. But the middle 30 years or so, I was either in an administrative kind of position, like a head nurse or nurse manager of a critical care unit, or a director of critical care, where I might have 2 or 3 or 4 critical care units that reported to me. Or I was in some kind of an education position within critical care. And the kinds of titles I had there were critical care educator or a clinical nurse specialist in cardiology or whatever. So, and I loved both of those types of work. So, when I would move to a new place, if I'd been in administration, I would go looking for an education position, or if I'd been in education, I'd go looking for administration, because I loved both kinds of positions. but was in critical care from the time the specialty was initially created until 2012. In the last few years that I worked, I was living here in Ashland, and I was working at Ashland Hospital in their little 4-bed ICU. I'd never worked at such a small hospital, and I'd never worked at a 4-bed ICU before. You know, I'd worked in gigantic places, many of those places. But I loved that experience and loved that environment. However, during that period of time, I started getting uncomfortable with something, and I'll tell you what that something was. We would get patients in that were critically ill, obviously, and there was a group of patients that were very likely to survive if we did what we needed to do with those patients. But there was another group of patients that it was very unlikely that they would survive no matter what we did. And that was the group of people that I was starting to feel uncomfortable about what we were doing. And this question came to my mind. And the question was, let me move forward here. Yeah. So the question was, were we hindering their ability to have a peaceful death because we were focused only on trying to save their life at all cost? And I was worried about that, because in those patients that didn't make it, they ended up dying in. So in both of those groups of patients, we would essentially, for most patients, we would put them on a ventilator, which means putting a tube down their throat into their lungs, putting them on a ventilator. We would tie their hands down so that they couldn't accidentally pull the tube out. And we would put them in a medically induced coma so that they weren't aware of what was going on. And then that way we could treat them, and they were in a state of rest physiologically. But then if they didn't survive, they died in that state, and that was bothering me. You know, they never had a chance to know whether they were dying or not, in my estimation. I didn't know what they would think, but it was bothering me. So around that same time, I heard about a program that was being brought to Rogue Valley by this fellow. His name is Richard Groves, and he has a center in Bend called the Sacred Art of Living Center in Bend. And Richard, early part of his life, he was a Catholic priest, but eventually he left the priesthood and he became a hospice chaplain, and he worked in the hospice program in Bend for a long time. And in working with those patients, he eventually identified that there were some patients or some people that had a harder time letting go and kind of easing into a death. And he discovered the reason that frequently happened was that they hadn't dealt with issues in their life. And he had identified that there were 4 kind of specific groups of issues that if people had those issues, that they tended to have a difficult time letting go. And those were issues around relationships, forgiveness, hope, and meaning. And if they hadn't dealt with those at the end of life, they would be hanging on to life and not wanting to die, even though their body was very ready to die. So it sounded like an interesting program to take. So I signed up for it. I was still working in the ICU at Ashland Hospital, but I took that 2-year program. And when and it was a great program, and I learned a lot. And at the end of that program, Richard was going to be offering a second 2-year program. And he called it the Anam Cara apprenticeship. And the term Anam Cara is Celtic words meaning soul friend or soul companion. And what he was teaching is a way that the Celtic folks worked with death and dying back in the Middle Ages, between the 6th century and the 12th century A.D. In every village, in every city, in every town in the Celtic lands, there were people that functioned as Anam Caras, and their job was to help people get ready for a peaceful death. So I thought that sounded like a really good thing to learn about. So I signed up for that 2-year program. And I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to move forward here. Whoops. Yeah, okay. So at the beginning of that, the first day of that program, Richard was talking about the tradition of Anam Cara, and he had talked about that in the previous 2-year program that I had taken. And I remember sitting there thinking that I wasn't going to learn anything new that hour, that I had heard him talk about that before, and that was it. I wasn't going to learn anything new. And I was totally wrong. He said like 3 or 4 sentences that just I had never heard him say before, and it just shocked me, and it eventually took me in a whole different direction in my life. He said, you know, there were some Anam Caras in the Celtic time that had a special ability. They could not only walk with someone to dying, they could, get them ready for dying, but there were some Anam Caras that would walk with someone through dying. They could escort them to the other side of the veil at the moment of death. And they were called Anam Aira, a carer of the soul. And when he said that, I felt like I'd been hit with a bolt of lightning. I sat up in my chair and I said to myself, I need to know how to do that. And I had no idea why I thought that, but I absolutely knew. I mean, it had never happened to me before in my life where I heard, a few sentences and just said, okay, this is where my life is going. That had never happened before, but I was absolutely sure that that's what I needed to know how to do. However, the concept of Anam Aira in general has not been practiced since the Middle Ages. I, at that point, as I was finishing up the Anam Cara apprenticeship, I was in probably my last year of working at Ashland Hospital. And I started doing a little bit of Anam Cara practice on the side, where I would be working with people at the end of life, helping them get ready for dying. So I was doing a bit of that Anam Cara work, and I understood the Anam Cara work, and I was doing the practice. But the concept of Anam Aira, I still knew that I needed to do that, but I didn't know initially how I was going to learn how to do that. It wasn't something that Richard Groves taught, and it wasn't something that was really taught anywhere that I knew of. So in thinking about how I was going to learn to do that, so for me, the thought about how to be an Anam Aira, it seemed to me that there was 2 parts of that process. One would be that I would need to know exactly when somebody was going to die so that I could be there with them to escort them across the veil. But the bigger issue was, if I'm going to escort them across the veil, I need to know how to go across the veil and where to go and how to get back. And I didn't know that. So what I did know is back in 1985, I discovered a book. And it was one of those things where I'm sure all of you have probably heard about this, and maybe it's happened to many of you. You're in a bookstore and you're looking at a bookshelf and a book falls on your foot. Well, that happened, and that book that fell on my foot was a book called Far Journeys by Bob Monroe or Robert Monroe. And I, since it fell on my foot, I decided to take it home and read it. And I read and reread and reread and reread that book over the years. So Bob Monroe was, back in the 1950s and 60s, he was a businessman in New York City. There's a lot of, several white-haired people here. And I remember way back when we had radio. And I remember a program that we used to listen to called, oh shoot, now I'm going to forget the name of it, The Shadow. Well, Bob Monroe was the guy that produced that program, The Shadow. The Shadow knows. Yeah. So anyway, he was a well-known businessman in New York City. In the late 1950s into the 60s, he started having what he later termed out-of-body experiences. He would wake up in the middle of the night and he would be under the bed or on the ceiling looking down, or outside of looking out from, he would be outside the window looking in at the bedroom. And initially he thought he was going crazy, or that he was dying, or that he had cancer, or something awful was happening to him. So for the first year or so, he went to doctors and psychiatrists, and nobody could find anything wrong with him. So he decided that he would just play with it. So before he'd go to bed at night, he'd say, okay, I want to wake up in Paris or London or wherever. And at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, that's where his consciousness would be. He'd, walking down the streets of Paris, I wish I could do that. Well, I can do that actually now. I can do that. As he was bebopping around, he did that for years, and as he was bebopping around, I'm trying to keep track of time here. So he eventually ran into or met a non-physical guide, and this guide said, would you like to have other interesting experiences? And Bob said, yeah, I'd like that. And Bob was a very adventuresome fellow. So that non-physical guide took him to the other side of the veil. So his first book that he wrote was called Journeys Out of the Body, and that was about his that first time when he was kind of bebopping around Earth, having experiences. Far Journeys was about his initial experiences on the other side of the veil. And then he wrote a third book that came out in 1992, I think. That was called The Ultimate Journey. And when that came out, I added that to Far Journeys and reread and reread both of those books. Every year I would sit down and reread them both because I was fascinated, and I just was fascinated, and I never. And so the other thing that Bob Monroe did was back in the 1970s, he created an institute back in Virginia called the Monroe Institute, and he did that for two reasons initially. One was to study his own experience. So he created a lab there that had. And that initial lab had an EKG machine, an EEG machine, a precursor to a brain scan machine. So he would go to the lab, and these guys would hook him up, and he would have these experiences, and they would monitor him physiologically. And he also created the Monroe Institute so that he could teach other people how to go to the other side of the veil. So I knew that that there were lots of programs at the Monroe Institute that would teach you how to go to the other side of the veil. So I retired from nursing at the end of 2012, and I decided I would go to the Monroe Institute. That would be one way to learn how, if I'm going to be an Anam Aira, if I learn how to go to the other side of the veil, that would get me set up so that when I took somebody else over, and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do that, but if and when I took somebody else over, I would know where to go. So at the end of 2012, I took a Gateway program, which was, it's the kind of the initial program to take it to Monroe Institute if you want to learn to go to the other side of the veil. And then in January into February of the following year, I took both the Lifeline program and Exploration 27. So when I got back here after taking all of those 3 programs, lots of my friends wanted to know what my experience was. So I would have small groups of people meet in my little cottage and talk about what my experiences were. So then people started asking me if I could go find their loved one on the other side. So a mother or a father or husband or a wife or son or a daughter who had died. They might want to know, they might be just curious how that person is doing, or they might be worried about the person, or for whatever reason, they would like to know and like to have some kind of contact with the person on the other side. So I started doing that, and how I did that. So when Bob Monroe first created the Monroe Institute, one of the things that he did was he created this sound technology called hemisynchronization. It's based on a binaural beat sound. So there's a sound that you're listening to that you hear, and then there's a sound that's embedded below what you can hear. And in that sound, there's 2 different levels of hertz that are coming into your ear. So you have headset on, or headphones, or earbuds on, and you've got one sound of hertz coming in one ear, and the other sound, another level of hertz coming in the other ear, and it essentially helps you get into a deep meditative state really easily. So when I went to the Monroe Institute, we used the HemiSync CDs to have all of our experiences. So when I came back here and people started asking me if I could go find their loved one and see how they were doing, I would just get one of the HemiSync CDs on and sit down and do that. But before I'm just going to kind of briefly talk about this. So one of the things, when Bob Monroe was out there exploring the other side of the veil, he discovered that there were different levels of awareness or levels of consciousness on the other side, and each of those levels of consciousness was associated with a particular function on the other side of the veil. Normal consciousness, what we're all in now, C1 or Focus 1, we're in normal, regular consciousness. Focus 10, he described as mind awake, body asleep, and like when we do meditation, we sit down and get into a meditative state. That's what we're in Focus 10 when we're doing that. Our consciousness is in Focus 10. Focus 15, anything from Focus 15 on is a no time state. So from Focus 15 on the other side, there's no concept of linear time. It's the eternal now that you experience. Focus 23, there's lots of things that can happen in Focus 23 and does happen in Focus 23, but one of the things that we probably all of us in this room have experienced is having a very vivid dream that you go to sleep and you have this vivid dream and you wake up, and it's different than regular dreams. These are vivid dreams. Or you feel like you're right there, you know. Well, in Bob Monroe's exploration over there, he discovered that when people were having those vivid dreams, they were in focus 23. And he would have conversations with them, and then all of a sudden they would, what he would call wink out, they would disappear. And what they were doing when they disappeared is they were waking up into regular consciousness. So that's one of the things that happens in Focus 23. So as you can understand or get some idea about, we are already over on the other side of the veil at times in our life. Does that make sense? Yeah. So Focus 24 to 26 is what Bob Monroe called the belief system territory. And since man has existed on Earth, any kind of spiritual concept of life or afterlife or whatever that man has created, there is an area on the other side that's associated with that level, that concept of the same concept that we have here. So there's a place for Catholics and a place. I grew up fundamentalist evangelical Christian. I know there's a place over there. And I don't want to go there. So some people, like if you have a strong belief about religion and about what's going to happen to you when you die, when you die, you immediately go to that belief system. Now you don't stay there forever, but you stay there until you as a soul are ready to not be there anymore. And Focus 27 is it's considered a way station. I mean, it's an amazing place. It's a way station, and it's a lot of things. It's where we go as a soul when we're ready to incarnate into a new life. So as a soul, when we're ready to start out to plan a new life, we go to Focus 27 and meet with our guides and the people on the other side that have been with us for eons of time. And we're all part of a soul family also. So our soul family is also there. So we plan out the life that we're going to have. We'll plan out, whether we're going to male or female, or where we're going to live, and who our family is, who our mother and our father and so forth is, and and our family members. Our family group is there, and family members will say, "Okay, I'll be your mother, and I'll be your father. I'll be that mean boss that gives you heartache," and So everybody that's in our lives, in any way, are our soul families. They're soul families from our soul group on the other side. So that's one of the things that happens in Focus 27. And another thing that happens in Focus 27 is most souls, when we die, go back to Focus 27 to get reintegrated into being a soul again. We're not human anymore, we're back being a soul. So we go back to Focus 27 to go through that integration. And then there are focus levels beyond Focus 27, which a couple of years ago I did an online Monroe program and went out into the universe. And we're not going to talk about that today, but it was an amazing experience. So this, I'm going to do this case study, and I did this last time, but I want to do it because it was the first experience that I had in becoming an Anam Aira. And I didn't know that I was doing that at the time that I did it. I didn't know until the following day that that's what I was doing. So one of my friends who lived here in Ashland had a twin sister who lived in Southern California. They were both 85 years old. And my friend Kathy had called me one day and told me that her twin sister was dying in Southern California. She was at her home in Southern California, and she had caregivers around the clock, and she was very restless and was the caregivers were having a hard time even keeping her in bed. She was moving back and forth so much. And Kathy wanted to know if there was any way that I could help her from a distance. She knew about my work. And at that time, at that moment, I didn't think of the concept of Anam Aira. I hadn't done Anam Aira yet. I hadn't done anything like that since that wake-up call some years before. So it wasn't in my consciousness that I was going to go be an Anam Aira. It didn't. I just thought, well, I think I will try to connect in with her soul. So when I'm connecting in with somebody on the other side, I'm connecting in with their soul. I'm not connecting in at the personality level. So when somebody asks me to go find their father, and I connect in with this loving being, and I write that up, and they say, well, my father was this bitch, or, he's not the person the being that I'm connecting in with is the soul. And the soul is not the personality that lived here. So I'd always connected in at the soul level on the other side. I had never connected in with the soul level with somebody here, still alive. That's quite presumptive to me, But I thought, well, if Karen is asking me, or Kathy's asking me, maybe I have permission to connect in, or to just go see if she will acknowledge me, her sister. So I get into the meditative state, and I say her name, and I'm immediately with her in her room in Southern California, and I can see her moving around back and forth in the bed, restless, and I see her soul is partway out of her body. And I've got it written up in here, and what I've written is better than my memory, so I'm going to read it. So when I first connected in with her, I introduced myself, as I always do. I say my name, and I say who sent me and why they sent me, why they want me to connect in with them. So I did that. My name is Judy Hilyard, and your sister Kathy wanted me to connect in with you to see if there's anything I could do to help you. And she says, there isn't anything you could do, go away. She was really upset, really angry with me, and she wanted me to go away. So initially I thought, well, I'm just going to hang out for a few minutes to see if she'll change her mind. I didn't interact anymore with her, but I just kind of was there in her space. And a few minutes later, she said, all right, come back the next day. So I said, okay, I'll come back the next day. So the next day, I get into meditative state, and I call her name. And I say, I call her name, and she responds immediately and with irritation. And she says, what's taken you so long? Which is different than the day before when she wanted me to get away from her. And now sounding relieved, yes, I will trust you. And I say, good, how can I help you? And Karen, sounding worried, says, I'm so frightened about dying. I don't know how to do it. I've been such an angry bitch my whole life. I'm afraid that I'm going to hell, even though I want to believe there is no hell. And both she and her sister had grown up Baptist. And her sister had stayed in the Baptist church and had met a Baptist minister and had kids and had lived her life as a good Baptist woman. But Karen had not lived that way. She had lived a quite non-religious life. So I explained to her, there is no hell. It's only a trap that your mind can put you in. It feels like hell, but it's just a loop of thinking that keeps you stuck. Karen responds with intensity. How do I get out of this thinking? It's been this way my whole life. My mind is in control and I can't stop it. And I say, you can stop believing what your mind is telling you. You are not an angry bitch. You are a sacred, precious being. Karen, sounding a little irritated. How do you know? You don't even know me. And I continue, well, I know that we are all precious beings. You are no different from anyone else on earth. You are a precious soul who has been living in a body. That body will not live much longer, but as a soul, you will continue to live. You will go back to the joy and love that you were before coming into body, the loving being that you are. Karen, very curious, how do I believe that? And I said, you don't have to believe it, just allow yourself to know the truth of it. Karen, nervous, how do I do that? And I say, listen to my voice, just listen. Focus on what I'm going to say. Listen without any judgment. For just this time, imagine that your mind is still. Focus only on the words I'm going to say to you. Are you ready? Karen, unsure. I guess so. And at that moment, I was as unsure as she was because I had no idea what I was going to say to her that would make a difference. But the truth is that when I'm over on the other side, I always get guidance. I'm not there by myself. So thank goodness. So as I start to mentally give her a message, this is what comes out. Karen, you are a precious holy being, full of love and understanding and compassion for that body you have. That body is not you. You are beyond, above, and wholly greater than your body. You are love. You are holy. You are an integral part of God. You are now, you have always been, and you will always be. Karen is silent, listening, barely breathing, taking this in, allowing it to sink into her awareness, into her soul, into her whole being. She starts to cry, a cry of release of judgment, anger, distrust, isolation, loneliness, fear, release of all of her negative feelings towards herself and others for a lifetime. Stillness now, profound, precious stillness, peace, joy, being held on the wings of love. The immeasurable depth of stillness, peace, and joy lasts for some time. I have no idea because it feels like forever. The encounter is so profound that I am barely breathing, and I'm sitting in my cottage and I'm sort of breathing like this. I felt like if I took a normal breath that I would disturb the peace in the room. So the stillness there and the stillness here are the same. There is no boundary between here and there. The profound stillness that surrounds Karen also surrounds me and my little cottage. Stillness beyond expression. Karen's family, her parents and loved ones that she has known in this lifetime and other lives are surrounding her. They are holding her, hugging her, loving her. She is taking it in, allowing love to fill her. Peace, joy, the golden light of love. And after some time, that experience fades, and I'm back in my cottage. And at that point, I'm in a state of a profound bliss. I'm just blissed out. So I walk around my cottage and I go outside in the backyard and I'm just kind of blissed. And it lasts for several hours. And then it's finally the bliss state kind of come down from that a bit, and I call Kathy to let her know that I had connected in with her sister, and that I would be writing it up. How I always do that is I'm in the state of meditation state, but I have a notebook in my hand, in my lap, and I write down things as they're happening. Otherwise, I don't think. Are you okay hearing me? Can you hear me? Okay. I don't think otherwise I would remember a lot, but I write it down. And then what I do is I type it up and I give it to the person who's asked me to go find that person. So I called Kathy later that day, and I said that I would write that up and I would bring over the write-up the next day to her place. And she said that she had gotten a call later that day from her from the caregivers saying that that around 1 o'clock that day, her sister had calmed down and relaxed, and then she died around 3:30. And I was with her during this experience between 1 and 1:40. So when Kathy told me that, I thought, well, maybe I've helped her in some way. So when I took the write-up that I did over to her the next day, and we're having a conversation, she says, well, she didn't die at 3:30. That was when the hospice nurse came to pronounce her. And the pronouncement of death is when somebody who has the skill and ability to do that comes and assesses the person to make sure that they've stopped breathing and their heart stopped. And then they put that down as the time of death. But Kathy said that the caregivers had said that she actually died at 1:20. Her heart stopped and she stopped breathing at 1:20. So that whole experience of being over on the other side with her, taking her over when her loved ones were there, and kind of handing her off to her loved ones, was as she died, and right after she died. So, and when Kathy told me that, I thought, I have become an Anam Aira. So that's why I didn't know it until the next day. So the next one I want to talk about, last time I was here, and I didn't have time to talk about Sophie, and there were a lot of disappointing sounds, so I thought I would get to Sophie this time. So Sophie was a beloved dog that I had. When I first moved here to Ashland, one of the gals that worked at the hospital with me in the ICU had this little dog, and one day we had a staff meeting, and Glenda brought Sophie with her to the meeting, and she was just this adorable, and that's her. That's a picture of her. She was just this adorable little dog, and she loved the snow. So and she was half miniature poodle and half American Eskimo. So she really loved the snow. She loved the winter. So about a year later, Glenda had asked me if I wanted to adopt her, because Glenda had a teenage daughter who, for some strange reason, didn't like Sophie, and she was always yelling at her, and Glenda thought that Sophie deserved a better life than to be yelled at all the time. So I said, yeah, I'd adopt her. So I had her for several years, and we had lots of fun together, doing all kinds of stuff together. And then one day, when she woke up, she was quite lethargic. And so I called my vet, and I took her to the vet. because she usually was quite a bouncy little girl. And they did lab work and they did some x-rays, but they didn't, the vet place that I went to at that time didn't have 24-hour care. So I couldn't leave her there overnight. I had to bring her home. So I brought her home, and she was, as I said, very lethargic. And she had her chair, and I had my chair. So I put her in her chair, and I moved her chair next to my chair. And that evening I sat there, you know, and she was right next to me, so I was able to talk to her and pet her and just love on her. And I cried a little. And then at one point, I got the sense that she wanted me to pick her up. So I picked her up and put her in my lap. And for an hour, she just stared into my eyes with the most loving look. You know, and I was sitting there. I had her in my lap, and I was crying, and I didn't have any Kleenex, and I couldn't get up. I couldn't disturb her to get up, so I'd lean back and, you know, sniff to get so I wasn't dripping on her. And then about an hour later, and at one point during that hour, she just sort of gazed around the room. It was like she was taking in the room. And then she started back gazing at me. It was the most loving look. It was just amazing. And about an hour later, I got the sense that she wanted to get back in her chair. So I put her back in the chair, and a couple of minutes later, she stopped breathing. So I want to read this to you. So at that time, I was doing my Anam Aira work. I was going across the veil, piece of cake with everybody, you know. No problem. I wasn't crying. I wasn't upset. And I would be escorting people across. Well, I couldn't do that at this point because I was too sad. I was crying, sobbing, and I couldn't go, you know. And I was sitting there thinking, I can't go. So I cried until I fell asleep. And then some hours later, I woke up. And she was still in the chair. She died. There wasn't anything getting her out of the chair. And I decided to go see if I could find her, to see how she was doing. So I got my HemiSync CD on and get into my meditative state and called her name. And this is what I experience. I see Sophie in my place in Focus 27. Now, one of the things that I learned to do at the Monroe Institute is one of the things you can do is create your own special place there. Hi. And I had created my own special place there years before. And so I created this wonderful log home. It would be a place that I would love to live in my current life, but I can always go there and visit. So it's a wonderful log home, and it's overlooking the ocean. And the front yard slopes down to a bay. And one of my guides sometimes shows up as a whale, as a humpback whale. So I can go down to the bay and hang out with Adventure. That's her name, Adventure. And get on her. I mean, in my book, I have a chapter on experiencing going off with her on her back on an adventure. So where I find Sophie's I didn't go to my place. I just called her name, and I'm always wherever they are, wherever who I'm calling their name. I'm where they are, wherever they are. So she was at my place in the front yard. So she's in the front yard, running around, getting down on her front paws, with her back end up. You know how dogs get down and their front paws down and their back end is up, and they're kind of playing like this. And we used to play that way all the time. And that's what she was doing. She was playing with a person. So she was moving back and forth sideways, like playing catch me if you can. The yard is spacious, sloping down from the house. She is playing on the beautiful green grass. She has her cute little body and adorable hair, but is a lot less physical. Brilliant light shines through her. Lightness and joy, fun, so much fun and joy is coming from her. She is playing with a person. The person is darting back and forth as Sophie is, moving back and forth. They are both having so much fun, playing. So happy, joyful. Light is also coming from the person. Bright light. Both have incredible bright light shining from their core. As I look closer at the person, I see that it is me. It is me. I am this shining, joyful, happy being playing with my Sophie, as we have done so many times. It is amazing to see myself. I've never seen myself on the other side before. I am the observer and the observed. So I'm there playing with my beloved Sophie, both of us very much alive and joyful. At the same time, I'm sitting in my chair crying over the dead body of Sophie next to me in my chair. Incredible joy on one side, incredible sadness on the other side. At the same time, both are real and both are true. I'm not going to read this, but about a month later, I went back and had another experience with Sophie, which is a wonderful experience. But so the thing that happened, because I went over there and was with her, it did take away a lot of the sadness that I felt initially. And I have a couple of friends that used to take care of Sophie when I traveled. Their names are Jean and Kay. So I called them that morning and asked them if they would be interested in having Sophie buried in their yard, and they said they would. So I called all of Sophie's friends and invited them to the funeral that was going to happen later that day. And it was a beautiful time. We had a beautiful experience burying her in Jean and Kay's backyard. And I cried a little, but mostly I felt joyful. I felt happy because I was still seeing her as I saw her on the other side. It was an amazing experience. Sister Mary I talked about last time, so I'm going to skip her. I'm going to talk about this one I had last time, but we didn't have time to talk about it. So when I was at the Monroe Institute, the third program that I took at the Monroe Institute was this program called Exploration 27, where we spent the whole week exploring Focus 27 and a bit beyond 27, but most of it was focused on 27. And there's lots of different functions that exist within Focus 27. As I said earlier, when we get ready to come into a life, as souls, we go to Focus 27 and meet with our guides and helpers to help plan out that life. And when we die, most of us go back to Focus 27 to go through the process of reintegration as a soul. But there's also other functions that happen within that level of awareness. And one of the functions that exists there is, that's where the Akashic records are housed. Many of you heard, probably all of you have heard about Akashic records. So each of us has our own Akashic record of all of our lifetimes. And the Earth has an Akashic record. I'm sure the universe has an Akashic record. I'm sure every planet has an Akashic record. I'm sure the United States has an Akashic record, and I'm sure every country in the United States, on the Earth, has an Akashic record. So it's a place where you can go and experience your own lifetime, your own past lives, and learn anything you want to learn. And many people experience that function in somewhat different ways. Many people experience it as a library. And I experience it as a library. However, it tends to have the shape of Chartres Cathedral. Because Chartres Cathedral is a place that I've been to many times and absolutely in love with. And I'm sure I've spent lifetimes there. So it looks sort of like a Chartres Cathedral building. So when I was taking that Exploration 27, we would have times where we could just have open time, where we could have whatever experience we wanted to have. So I decided that on this one particular time that I wanted to go to the library and just see if I could come up with a question that I want to ask. And when you're in that space, any question you have can be answered. But I remember just standing there, and I was kind of wondering what question to ask. I wasn't sure what to ask. And I was just kind of hanging out. And then all of a sudden, I see the entire back of the library open to reveal the expansiveness of the whole universe waiting for me. I saw my feet at the very edge of the library floor and, space. Like the pictures taken of the Hubble telescope. When I wrote this book, the new telescope hadn't come out yet, the James Webb telescope. So like the Hubble telescope. Space, only incredibly more vivid. My barefoot toes were just over the edge of what seemed like solid flooring. Beyond my toes was open space, with stars and galaxies, and bright colors of dust and gas, with no end in sight. The thought came to me, no boundaries, no beginnings, no endings, just being. Me, exploring the likes of which I never thought possible, but I always wanted to. Now, when I was in high school and nursing school, that was the time when the Apollo moon landings were happening. And I had envisioned myself of maybe I would be the first nurse in space. Well, I never was, but I did get to space. So as I experienced being out in space, I wrote an inadequate description. There are very few words in the paragraph below. Could every word take in the wholeness of this? There are no words that I know of that could possibly describe this except ineffable. Trying to capture the experience, I wrote this at the time. I step out into the vast universe, the experience of profound wisdom, the spectacular beauty, the presence of the universe, the aliveness of everything, the peace, the overwhelming love of the universe, to be out there, just floating, just being, experiencing the immensity of the presence of all, all light, all love, all understanding, all compassion, all experience, everything, timeless, all there is. After eons of time, I hear our facilitators calling us back to normal consciousness through the headset. It took me hours to get really back from that experience, although it happened, and although it happened years ago, I'm not sure I'm still back to who I was before. And time, what to say about time? How long did it last? I know that each of our HemiSync CDs lasted about 45 minutes, but to me it felt like eternity. Eternity and infinity, two words that might capture the enormity and the profoundness of this experience. As I thought about this later, I could not tell if I was in the real physical universe or some aspect of the expansiveness of the other side of the veil. Years later, when I asked my guides, who had then made themselves known to me, the answer was both and more. They wanted to give me a profound experience, and they knew I loved astronomy. They wanted me to relate to something known, like our physical universe, and experience dimensions unknown to me. I now understand that nothing experienced on the other side of this life can be described in just two possible answers. It's not just either or, yes, no, here, there, or this side or the other side of the veil. There is no dualism. There is an infinite number of correct answers, depending on what the being can comprehend in awareness. We experience all dimensions, beyond time and space and within time and space, multidimensional at the same time. The totality of our consciousness is infinite. We are generally only aware of the here and now of Earth. Yes, we are here and now and on Earth, and we are also on the other side of the veil. We are having lifetime after lifetime after lifetime at the same time, from the perspective of the other side of the veil, from the perspective of eternity. There is no concept of time once we leave our physical life. There is only the eternal now. No past, no future, just now. No form, just being. No thoughts, just experiencing. No feelings, just love. Incredible light and joy and peace and love beyond description. And at the Monroe Institute, after we would have whatever experience we were having, then we would meet downstairs in this meeting room, and we would debrief our experiences. And I raised my hand, and I was called on, and I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. I was just, I couldn't say anything. There was nothing. And it took me several hours to come back from that experience. They were so amazing and so profound. What time we got? I think I want to do one more, and then I want to open it for questions. So, higher self. We are souls, and on the other side, our souls are. Well, we're in the form of what what can be described as a higher self or a higher soul self. And in my experience, when we come into a life, and we have that life and then we die, the essence of that person that we were, this Judy Hilyard, when I die, will go back to my larger soul self and will be housed in the larger soul self in a state of animation, in animation. And like, if I'm talking about me, like if I had been married and had kids, and then I died, and my kids were still living, and when they die, they might want to see me. They might want to see me on the other side. So that aspect of me that was Judy Hilyard would show up there in Focus 27. But in general, that personality this person that I am, is generally is in a state of, I can't think of the word that I want, but is housed and inanimate within the larger soul self unless it's needed for some reason. Does that make sense? Okay. So, in one of Bob Monroe's books, he had written about connecting in with his higher self. And I always thought that was fascinating. And, I'd been doing this work and going to the other side for quite a while. And at that point, it hadn't occurred to me to go check in with my own higher self. But this one day, I decided that I wanted to do that. I wanted to try to do that anyway. And at that time, I had Sophie. She hadn't died yet. And I had read lots of books on near-death experiences, and I'd heard lots of talks of people that had near-death experiences. And lots of them talked about when they were on the other side, they didn't want to come back to life, no matter what that life had for them. That it was so much better, and having been over there on the other side, I know what that's like. It's so. I thought, well, what if I go to the other side? Because in all the times that I had gone to the other side, it had never been an issue for me to come back. I would just be there and I would do whatever I was doing, and then I'd be back. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't be back. But in thinking about going to my higher self, I thought, well, maybe I might not want to come back. And I didn't want, so if I don't come back, then my body is without a soul, and the soul's going to die. I mean, the body's going to die, because the soul is what partially animates the body. And I didn't want Sophie in my cottage with a dead body. So I asked my guides to help me come back. When I went over there, I wanted to have whatever experience I was having, but I wanted to be sure to come back, because I didn't want Sophie, because I had read stories of people who had died and their dogs or cats were in the house with them, and I didn't want that. So I asked my guides to, if I get over there and I don't want to come back, please bring me back. Get me back here. So let me find this. So I get into meditative state and send the intention out that I want to connect in with my higher self. And then what I see is giant orbs. Now, the picture that I have here, the orbs are kind of separated. what I saw were, and I couldn't find a picture of the way I perceived it, that I saw it on the other side, but it was like this huge area, and the orbs were, like if I was an inch tall, the orbs were hundreds of feet tall. That's comparison to the size of the orbs compared to me. And they went on forever. It was like I could see them going on forever. They were above me, below me, on all sides of me, below me. Orbs all over the place, and there was not distance like there is here, but I couldn't find one where the orbs were that close. So I am in front of a giant orb, and I'm looking up at it. There are other orbs in the background, but this is the one that I am totally drawn to. The orb is brilliant with light. It is pulsating. Now I am in it. There's overwhelming joy here. The light is omnipresent, golden presence. Light beyond, love beyond any words to express. This orb is me. It is all me. It is my soul, my essence. I am home, like no home we have ever known on earth. Home, the word, the condition, cannot be understood unless one is here. Home. Now, I repeat this word a lot, and I'll explain it later why that happens. The light is within all. The light is love and home and completeness and belonging. I am home where I belong. I have looked for this all of my life. I am overwhelmed with love and belonging and light. No words. I can barely handle it. Am I going to dissolve? I want to stay aware, conscious. The love. I am at home. The place. Yet I know I am home. That is who I am. I am home. The description is really beyond any words or feelings that I know how to express. It may seem like I'm repeating my experience, the words. How many times can I say, I am home? The encounter with my soul self kept reverberating, like being embraced with wave after wave of homeness, belonging. Not just an embrace, but an overwhelming homeness. I don't know how to express that profound feeling and state of being home and belonging. Therefore, the repeated words, as I am flooded with wave after wave of energy, presence beyond words. Joy is here. Joy is what is present. Joy and love and light, freedom, home. There are no real words to describe this. There is no expression. This is beyond language. This is beingness, homeness, presence, consciousness. It seems like eternity here. I am a one, so then I see myself as like I'm a one-person receiving line. And there are thousands of beings that come past me and touch me, I know each one of them. I know them better than I know this person, Judy Hilyard. How do I know them so well? They are all me, soul, essence, in thousands of lifetimes. They are all me. I greet Sister Mary and all of the other sisters. From how many lifetimes? The little girl in the burned out church in France is smiling at me. More beings, male, female, and other. More than I could ever count. Beings, me, in all kinds of dress and ages and physical and non-physical existence. All of the beings greet me, and I am embraced with love and compassion and incredible knowingness, knowing and understanding. I am wrapped and infused with the most magnificent beingness. I am home. And as I experience a bit more, the orbs are contained within a larger force, a larger life. Love and love and life and joy beyond imagination. All is life. All of life is contained within this existence. There are reverberations for all kinds of life forms, physical and non-physical. This larger force is an overarching life force, containing all of the individual lives, reimagine the vastness of this complete life. This is the force of love, love beyond understanding, containing all that we know and can conceive of, all that we could ever imagine as life, and beyond that. There is a larger force beyond that, and a larger one beyond that. It goes on into infinity. Life upon life upon life. Life is love, life is light, and it is all there is. And when I'm over there, one of the words that I get, or the expressions that I get for the word God, is all there is in caps. I float within it all. I am a speck. No, I am all there is. I am within, and I am all. The most joyful, open experience, forever, eternal. I float in the most perfect vibration. No words, no thing. Then there is wet, water on this face. What is a face? There is a face. I touch this face. It is wet with tears. This shirt is wet. Shirt, what's a shirt? Yes, a shirt. I touch the shirt. My face, the face of Judy. I'm in my chair, in my cottage. I've been crying. With what? Joy, love, incredible gratitude. As I become more aware of being in my cottage, I cry again. I'm back in this ordinary reality. I didn't get to choose if I would come back or not. I wasn't asked if I wanted to come back. I felt incredibly sad that I was no longer home. And yet, as time passed, that experience of home has never left me. The initial sadness of leaving home vanished quickly. I have this knowingness. I do know home now. I do belong, and I am home always. So I will stop here and open it for questions. Yes, Alan.
I have a question. When if you go into YouTube or other sources, you can find about near-death experiences. There's kind of a typical scenario in that where the body leaves. The soul, the spirit leaves the body, observes the body, and then is drawn into a tunnel of light. Typically, there's a being of light at the end of the tunnel. There's, as you so wonderfully described, this overwhelming love experience. Is the near-death experience and actual death experience, at least in the initial phases, pretty much the same thing?
It is. Although when I experience going over there, I don't experience a tunnel. I'm here, and then I'm there, and then I'm back here.
Right.
And when I first started doing this, when I was over there, I would experience, like if I went from focus 23 to focus 25, I would experience some sense of travel, of movement. But I don't experience that now. It's instantaneous.
Gotcha. I have one more question. Years ago, I got the tape version of the Gateway experience, and I worked with that for some period of time, and I never got anywhere with it. I guess I just wasn't ready. The question is actually getting the CDs, the hemisync stuff, in any way equivalent to going to Monroe Institute? Or is it just a weak representation thereof?
No, they used those same CDs at the Monroe Institute, and I had those CDs before they were CDs. They were What?
By tapes.
Yeah,
tapes.
yeah, there were the little tapes. And I tried for years to have an experience, and I had very little. I think for me, there was a difference in being there.
Yeah, okay.
You know, for me, it's like that place is greased for experiences. The out of body, real easy. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question about Focus 27. So you had referred to it as like your family, right? That is like part of your family. Is that correct?
Well,
Like your
we are all part of a soul family. Yes.
Okay. Does that include grandparents and mother and?
Well, as a soul family on the other side, I mean, there's a huge group, and that group, when any souls in that group reincarnates, members of that family usually choose to come back with that person. So they take on the roles of that they would take on here as mother, father, grandparent, whatever.
So my next question is that I'm leading up to is, are you able to see unborn children?
Am I able to see?
Well, is it possible to see unborn children?
That's a good question.
And there was another question on top of that question, which, if you are able to communicate with the unborn children, could you ask them where their mom is?
So let me tell you an experience that I had. I had a friend of mine who had an abortion.
Uh-huh.
She was married, but she was in an environment, in a situation where she did not want to bring a child in. So she had an abortion, and she didn't tell her husband at the time. And then some years later, when they were in a better situation, she had another child. And that child came in angry, pissed off. And she always thought that it was the soul of that first baby that she had aborted. So at one point, she asked me if I could go check on that to see if that was true. And that was not true. The baby, the soul that was aborted, was fine with that. I mean, there's no judgment on the other side about abortion or no abortion. It's just a decision. And when you come into a particular life, if you're going to be a potentially aborted, you know that coming in. And maybe you're there just for the experience that the parents are going to have with that abortion. Or if it's a child that dies of SIDS, that child knows coming into that life that it's going to be a very short life. So there's a reason that they come in, and that they're part of that. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Vaguely. But thank you.
yeah.
So Judy, you mentioned this idea of grandchildren wanting to perhaps meet grandma on the other side with maybe years in between. Because I played around a lot with many lives, many masters, you know, it's like, does this idea of this, I mean, since there is no time over there, so it's just that ability to be able to have grandma actually show up to have this experience with grandchildren is just one of the many experiences that are available with the lives that one's lived. I mean, because there's many lives.
Right.
And so it's just sort of like magic.
Yeah,
that,
it is.
That
Yeah.
if called forth,
Right.
then one's there in that
Right.
form.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and we choose what roles that we want to, you know, if somebody has a life and they want to say, okay, I want some challenges here, and you know, and part of your soul family will say, okay, I'll be the mean person, you know, and it might be somebody that you absolutely hate in this life, but on the other side, they're part of your soul family, and they're doing that, they're doing you a favor.
Can you talk a little more about that? What's the favor? If
What's the
there's,
favor?
no, I think we've all, most of us have experienced, in the world, there are horrific acts. So how do you understand or perceive that? And connected to that is, when you talked about the obstacles, forgiveness was one. Connected to that is the question around forgiveness of atrocities. So, yeah, that's what I'm wondering, how you perceive the gestalt of these connections.
So as eternal souls, the idea of being killed off in one lifetime or another lifetime is not a big deal. There are lessons, we know, as souls, we know that there are lessons that we're learning. Either we personally are learning, or our family is learning, or somebody is learning, or not learning.
Yeah, that's the part I'm asking.
Yeah.
As well, yeah.
And if you don't learn it this time, you come back and you can choose. I mean, you can choose. You're eventually going to come back and do it again until you get it. And I, for one, have started to realize in my life, I don't want to come back and deal with the lessons that I had this lifetime. There may be others, but I don't want to deal with these. So I've spent a good part of my time in the last several years going through forgiveness processes. So for me, it's very freeing. I can just be letting go. And I'm not perfect yet, but hopefully by the time I die, I will be closer. So, and you know, and we I mean, the thing is, we choose it. We choose it. We choose the life that we're living. And when I was in a bad relationship, I can look back on that and I can blame that person and I can be all mad and upset. Or I can say, I chose it. I chose it for a reason. I chose to learn something. I chose to wake up. So, I don't know if that helps, but...
It helps. I worked with children as a therapist in my life, and I think of young children, the vulnerability and that power dynamic, et cetera. I mean, we can think of so many world situations as well. So the concept of choice becomes within the mind. I kind of on another level, I hear that, but there's something that becomes very gritty and challenging.
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is.
It is.
It is. The life that we live here
Yeah.
is tough.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what happens to children all over the
Yeah.
world is and those children agreed to those lives. They agreed to come in to those lives for whatever reason. So.
When we're talking about knowing, the knowing comes from before you come in. But is there then kind of an eraser that the baby starts and lives his life and it's the only life they know, and everything that's in the future is a surprise and all of that. And then die and find out that that was all orchestrated completely in an area where there is no time and there's no sequential living and so forth. But then there's you, and those who now know that you are living a life of a choice, as opposed to many of the people who feel that they are the victims of their lives, or they're enhanced by the life, or they've learned a lesson, or they'll never learn that lesson because they're going to hate that person forever. And then they go back and they start a process perhaps again of coming back that they don't actually know when they are birthed of any of this stuff that's happening, until they get spirit. Maybe this is the higher soul self saying, hey, I can show you something while you're still there.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. When did you come to that awareness that you were already that higher self?
When did I come to the awareness that,
You're that higher self, that you actually know what's going on with you here while you're here?
well, it's been a gradual understanding. I mean, I started reading Bob Monroe's books back in 1985. And he had a particular understanding of that. But I think now, I think we're living in actually a very wonderful time, because I was on a podcast yesterday with 2 days ago. A group of people in Canada had invited me to be on their podcast. And there was some amazing people there I felt like a newbie, amazing people that from all over the world that are learning this stuff and knowing this stuff and living this kind of life. It's wonderful that there are so many that this knowingness is available now, where it wasn't most of our lifetimes.
Thank you.
You used the term "my guide" several times, and I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
We all have helpers on the other side that are with us throughout all of our lifetimes and are with us when we're over there. And that function as guides and helpers. And when you start doing this kind of work, they tend to show up, make themselves known.
Are they always the same person?
There are different ones, and I'm sure I have more guides than I'm even aware of at this point. Yeah. I'm sure we have a ton. Yeah.
Hi, Judy. Speaking of podcasts, I had the pleasure of being introduced to you last November when you were on the Next Level Soul podcast with Alex Ferrari.
Yeah.
And I noticed
That blew me away.
Yes, that's my question. There were 180,000 views on that. So what kind of an impact did that have on all of the work that you do?
On me?
Were you overwhelmed with calls?
Yeah. I've had, so yeah, it's had like somewhere around 180,000 views at this point. It's called Next Level Soul, if you want.
I saw it.
Yeah. There were many times during that podcast that I wished I was more articulate, but I can't go back and fix it. So, however, one of the things that Alex had asked me for is the name of my website. And on my website, I have a form that people can fill out if they want to get a hold of me. And the weird thing is that form has been showing up in 2 different formats. And one of the formats I couldn't read for a while. Now I can read both formats. So combining those 2 formats, and I'm not sure why it's doing that, but I've had over 500 requests for people to want me to do this or that or have questions or whatever. So when I did the podcast, Alex stayed on the line with me after the interview was over for a few minutes, and he said, you know, you need to get ready. And I thought I was ready, but I was not. So the first 2 weeks, my friend Jerry knows, I just kind of sat there. You know, and then like 2 weeks later, I kind of woke myself up and said, okay, I need to start doing some stuff here. I need to start answering people. So, yeah, it's been quite a ride so far, and it continues. Yeah.
I have a question for you. When you described connecting with the higher soul self, that was such an incredible experience, and just the way you described it. How does that serve you in everyday life? I mean, do you have some way of just getting back there? If you're like down in the dumps or really pissed off or whatever, can you have a way of getting back to that state? Have any shortcuts?
Well, I don't go back to that state particularly necessarily, but I go back to remembering who I really am and who everybody else really is. I can get back to that pretty quickly. You know, and I still get upset about stuff. You know, my dog had surgery on her knee a little while ago, and you know, and I had insurance for her, and then they decided not to pay for it because she'd had the same kind of problem 3 years before on the other knee. Well, I was really upset there for a few minutes. But in my, you know, previously, I would have been probably upset for a very long time, and would have taken me maybe forever to get over it, and it took me half a day or less than that, you know, and then I was.
It's just an inner knowing
Yeah.
that you can just access.
Yeah, yeah.
Great, thanks.
Wow.
Anything else?
I was just gonna say, you know, nowadays with like the Next Level Soul broadcast, it's very evident that, you know, there's a rather massive awakening going on now,
Yeah,
which equates with you saying this is quite a remarkable time
It
living
is.
in
it
nowadays.
is, yeah.
And that ability to turn around quick, like you said. And that always reminds me, it's like turning the other face is really what it's all about.
Yeah,
And there's been so much confusion over that statement. That really we turn the face from the negative
right.
to the positive. It's pretty simple when you get right down to it. But the thing is, it requires being honest with oneself to do that.
Yeah,
And that's where the sticky point is.
right.
Because we're afraid we're gonna get smacked. I mean, it's all, you know, the fear factor is so strong in there. And that's part of what's changing nowadays. But it's up to us individually to change that, to turn that face.
That's right.
And it's like, I really appreciate your presentation,
Thank you.
because you're offering and emphasizing once again that the fact that we all have that ability. And what's waiting for us? Well, it's on the other side or it's on this side. Which do we want? You know, is this gonna be our heavenly abode? Or is it not?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be this hard line, heavy duty learning experience the way we designed it and put it together. We can change that.
Right?
And it's showing up everywhere.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate what you have to offer.
Thank you. We are all souls.
You betcha.
And as souls, we are loving beings. And we're just playing a role.
Yeah, I mean, we keep on rolling.
That's right. Okey doke.